There is no way out. Gods preserve, what is that thing? Gods, damn it! We cannot hold much longer. Ah, ah!
Hello Eorzeans! Welcome to the Fall and Rise of Final Fantasy XIV Episode 5. I'm Lukeil Bravestone, and here's a quick update on what's happening on this channel in the future. This series will go into a short break after this episode before we tackle the 2.x era, but fear not, in the meantime I'll start working on two new projects. First off will be Remnants of a Realm, a series dedicated to showcasing the remnants of 1.0 still very much visible and accessible in the current game. Following that series, we'll have Chronicles of A Realm, which will show the 1.0 main story for all three city-states leading up to the unified main story. And when that is done, Fall and Rise of Final Fantasy XIV will return. And lastly, thank you all for your feedback on the previous video. I love you. Okay, enough of that. Let's get into the episode. Final Fantasy XIV is preparing for massive changes, and in April 2012, Square Enix announced that Final Fantasy XIV would implement a legacy status for anyone subscribed for 90 days from January 2012 till beta testing for 2.0 starts. This would give you, in addition to bragging rights, a cheaper monthly subscription fee, your name in the game's credits, and a legacy chocobo exclusive to legacy players. Gaming news outlets reports on Final Fantasy XIV's progress with careful optimism, still only viewing 2.0 as a content patch to be released around October of 2012. Meanwhile, Dalamud creeps ever closer. Patch 1.22 is released on April the 25th, 2012, and at this point, Dalamud was now so visible in the sky, there was no longer any doubt that Eorzea was about to face its darkest day soon. In addition to Dalamud getting closer, Garuda was introduced to the game, and she was actually not supposed to be there. Titan was slated to be released before Garuda, but due to the 2011 earthquake in Japan, the dev team decided that introducing an earthquake primal to the game this early on could be offensive, so despite having completed the arena and had the actual primal model in the game, they gave way to Garuda instead. Sorry Titan, you just have to wait. And with this update, Hamlet Defense was introduced. And Hamlets were big events taking place in, well, hamlets. These were basically settlements located around Eorzea. However, when it was first implemented in patch 1.22, Hurstmill was the only hamlet defense available. The goal of a hamlet defense was, as the name suggests, to defend the hamlet from beast tribes trying to attack and pillage it. The hamlet defense was divided into two phases. A 50-hour non-combat phase where players could enhance the hamlet and prepare it for battle, and a 25-hour combat phase where players joined the local militia to combat the beast tribes directly. Hamlets provided something for everyone, and was widely considered a success for Final Fantasy XIV. Crafters and gatherers worked together with combat classes in the same content, which was sorely needed and actually worked to a degree. Let's look closer at how the hamlets actually worked. During the non-combat phase of Hamlet Defense, players were asked to contribute to the Hamlet's stockpiles by crafting and delivering several different items. Hamlet starts off the phase with a supply rating of 0. Each donation to the Hamlet militia is converted into points, which was then added to the Hamlet's total. When this total reached a certain amount, the Hamlet's supply rating would increase. This rating did not only determine the strength of the Beastmen forces, but also the type of rewards offered after the combat phase. The truly unique part of this system was the fact that all disciplines could join, be it gatherers or crafters, disciples of war or magic, everyone had their part to play. During the first phase, disciples of war and magic would complete escort duties to accumulate supply points, while disciples of the land and hand crafted and gathered items requested by the Hamlet's militia quartermaster. You could also deliver any materia-enhanced weapon or gear to accumulate supply points. Once the 50 hours of preparation ended, the supply rating was locked and the assault commenced. However, the fights were instanced, so you had to talk to the militia captain to be let into the action. A full party was required to enter, and if you successfully won a battle, you could not come back until 15 minutes had passed. Now the interesting part here is that you could enter these battles as a disciple of Hand and Land as well. Once inside, a disciple of the land could collect alchemical pots that were stored throughout the hamlet and delivering them to the militia quartermaster, resulting in different enfeeblements. Disciples of the Hand would enhance the other players by crafting instruments of warfare with parts found all around the hamlet and delivering them to the quartermaster. In this system, all classes work together for a common goal. The main objective of this phase was to protect the 4 supply carts located around the hamlet. If all 4 carts were lost, the mission would fail. If protecting the carts were successful, the mission would be deemed a success and you would be presented with a final score. Speaking to the militia captain before leaving the instance, you would receive a reward. The reward was calculated on your score during the battle phase, but also on your contribution during the first phase. As long as the combat phase was going on, you could repeat the battle as many times as you wanted. With this content, core Final Fantasy XIV players were starting to really settle into the game. However, the joy is to be short-lived. Eorzea is already changing, Imperial strongholds are being erected in Mordona, and adventurers all over Eorzea started having bad dreams. On the official forums, players are desperately trying to figure out the meaning of this approaching moon. The community is split. What does Dalamud do exactly? Will it become a second planet we can visit? Will it hit Eorzea? And if it does, what will it mean for the future of the realm? Will the entire world get blown away? To start anew in 2.0? Square Enix and the dev team is tight-lipped, but the new Seventh Umbral storyline reveals ever more information about the Red Moon, indicating that Eorzea might very well be headed for an era-ending calamity. During E3, on June 6, 2012, Square Enix finally revealed the in-game screenshots for 2.0, as well as some really neat concept art, showing off the new battle system, UI, and world design. And there, in the midst of all these pictures, one image stuck out. The one thing players had been worried about for a long time finally reveals its ugly face in what seemed to be a pre-rendered image, Dalamud, followed by a picture of a warrior in a burning landscape. If you didn't freak out before, you certainly were now. Still not explaining exactly what Dalamud's role will be in the transition from 1.0 to 2.0, players were left to speculate. Meanwhile, Final Fantasy XIV is recovering. Player numbers are stabilizing for the first time since release. The pressure is on the dev team to ensure that the remaining players don't jump ship when the game relaunches. When designing the new areas, it was decided that the city-states would remain largely the same, but with a few design changes to make them easier to navigate. Limsa Lominsa and Gridania saw the biggest changes, with areas being cut off and in some cases removed entirely. Ul'dah was to be kept more or less the same, however, with the optimization in mind, Ul'dah's main entrance could finally be opened, albeit with a loading screen. In 1.0, in order to hide the invisible loading going on in the background, entry to Ul'dah from Thanalan was done from the sides, forcing you to run through a long corridor before coming in, despite having a massive gate right in front of you. To deal with the challenge of making the game work on both PC and PS3, the dev team had to make sure the maps were properly optimized. The 1.0 maps were mostly empty, but massive, at the expense of client and server stability. For 2.0 they envisioned a more living, breathing world, but at a slightly smaller scale, separating the massive maps into several smaller maps to ensure that the zones could have a lot going on in them while still running smoothly on both systems. July 25th, 2012. Patch 1.23. Dalamud is now so close, the mechanical parts of the moon are now clearly visible. Clear white lines pulsating through what looks like metal plating is lighting up the sky, and the intentions are now clear. The Garleans want to pull Dalamud down to Hydaelyn, and you have to stop them, cause surely we will, right? This also saw the last and often overlooked content to be added to the game, Skirmish. This placed a party of up to 8 players on an island where they would be fighting waves of powerful notorious monster strength bosses. It was basically like a dungeon, except there was only one small area and the bosses would come to you, so yeah. The time limit was 30 minutes and the reward for completing a skirmish was a main hand weapon. Shortly after this patch, a trailer for 2.0 was released, showing Dalamud's descent, and the name A Realm Reborn is finally revealed. In the span of a month, Naoki Yoshida made numerous interviews explaining his plans for the future of Final Fantasy XIV with A Realm Reborn, teasing features such as free companies and a revamped lodestone, as well as stating that Final Fantasy XIV will no longer have a grind-oriented leveling system, but instead have a quest and content-driven leveling system, further specifying that, quote, "No longer will randomly defeating public monsters be the most efficient way to level your character." Patch 1.23a was released on, quite fittingly, Friday the 13th of August 2012. With it came the hardest and, according to most Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 players, the most epic fight ever implemented in 1.0's lifetime, Riven Road. An 8-man trial where the adventurers attack the Dalamud puppet, Nael Van Darnus, on top of a floating island with Dalamud looming above. Defeating Van Darnus concluded the Seventh Umbral storyline with the Legatus dissolving and flowing into Dalamud. Players were left with a burning question. What now? Surely we stopped it, and... what? Dalamud is now blaring in the sky. Time is running out. Eorzea's ethereal balance is out of control. Atomos starts appearing in certain camps around Eorzea, consuming ether from the aetheryte crystals, rendering them inoperable. Atomos also made sure to bring some powerful void-sent enemies with him. Defeating Atomos would drop loot, so it was a very popular thing to farm. Atomos had 2 phases. During the first phase you could only attack the adds. When reaching the second phase, the aetheryte would turn orange, and Atomos would now be vulnerable to attacks. An announcement was made on September the 11th, 2012 on the Lodestone, letting everyone know that Final Fantasy XIV will shut down entirely on November the 11th, 2012. From September the 29th, the billing procedures were to be suspended, and all account creations and special item codes would no longer be available. And that a letter from the producer live, episode 4, would air 2 hours after the servers were shut down. September the 12th, 2012. Patch 1.23b. Dalamud is now at its closest. The skies are covered in dark clouds, making it hard to distinguish night from day. Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 has received its last patch ever, and the stage is set for the dramatic ending of a deeply troubled game. All over Eorzea, Eorzeans gather up with their link shells, finally realizing that this is, in fact, happening. In the last week of the game's operation, entry to Eorzea was free for everyone that owned the game and had an account. The last phase of the End of an Era project begins. The Garleans are invading Eorzea, the city-states prepare for invasion, and the battle is set to take place at the Carteneau Flats. Ul'dah is overrun by rampant monsters, sometimes going completely bonkers. The GMs clearly had fun, sometimes spawning ridiculous amounts of mobs in Ul'dah, even blatantly duplicating the same mob several times. And this is where we also saw the heartwarming unification of the Final Fantasy XIV community. Everyone involved remembers the Great Gobu Wall, formed by players to protect Ul'dah from the invading forces, to no avail. But the game would not make it easy to enjoy, of course. The servers, which had always run past their limits, now had to deal with all the new content, as well as the influx of players joining in on the last day of Eorzea. So the servers crashed a lot. On top of all the drama that was playing out all over Eorzea, the default background music changed to a haunting rendition of answers playing everywhere in the realm. This still gives me the chills. But for those that were lucky enough not to be kicked every 5 minutes and enjoy the end of 1.0, it was something special. Monsters running rampant in Ul'dah is one thing, admittedly a very cool thing, but the atmosphere, the sense of defeat, and the crippling wave of sadness that constantly hit you when the haunting version of Answers played, it was unique. If anything, 1.0 had a distinct feel to it that is very hard to replicate anywhere. I know it's really hipster to say this, but you just had to be there to fully understand. Finally, on Sunday, November the 11th, 2012, with players gathering with their Link Shell members and in some cases still fighting Garleans, Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 took its final breath and the servers finally died. Immediately after, a trailer was released, showing what exactly happened after the servers shut down. We were presented with what I personally still feel is the most epic and emotional video game cutscene I have ever seen, showing the desperation as the Eorzean Alliance battle against the Garlean Empire while Dalamud makes its descent above them. All this happening while the theme song Answers plays in the background. And then, out of the blue, Dalamud drops a heavy object and the moon starts to crack open, revealing that it kept a mighty creature inside, Bahamut, spreading his wings and immediately starting to destroy Eorzea as we know it. And we, the players, saved by Louisoix at the very end, sent forward in time to safety. And thus ends the tale of Final Fantasy XIV 1.0. But from the ashes of 1.0, A Realm Reborn rose like a phoenix and lifted the franchise back from the dark depths. Thank you for watching this episode of the Fall and Rise of Final Fantasy XIV. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like if you did and subscribe if you want more, and let me know in the comments if you were there at the end of 1.0 and what you were doing. This series will take a quick break for now, but I'll be back in episode 6 of the Fall and Rise of Final Fantasy XIV soon. Don't forget about Remnants of a Realm and Chronicles of a Realm, they are both coming up soon. See you there, and may you ever walk in the light of the crystal.